Hey guys, so today I'm going to be explaining how a rotary engine works. I got this engine from my '05 Mazda RX-8. It is a 13B multi-side port engine, also called the Renesis engine. So yeah, I'm going to give you a basic overview of what the major components are of the engine, and as well as some more technical things that are very important for the engine to run. And then I'm going to show you how it works, how combustion is made, how it makes power, and then I'm going to explain some of the advantages and disadvantages of this engine. So to begin, this is going to be your rear plate. This is going to be your rear rotor housing. This is going to be your center plate. This is going to be your front rotor housing, and this is going to be your front plate. And this is your coolant housing, which is not part of the engine in a technical sense, but is necessary for the engine to function at all. This is the eccentric shaft. It is the same thing as a crankshaft in a conventional engine. It pretty much just has the rotor's balance right on here. Oh, and this is your rotor. Yeah, these are the famous rotors. It's the piston equivalent. So yeah, these just kind of sit up on these little oblong things and they twist around as such. And yeah, these are just some springs, but yeah, that's basically your major components of a rotary engine. So now I'm gonna show you the inside of the housings here to kind of show you some of the important features inside there. First I have to slap this together real quick. Alright, so I'm going to take you guys a bit closer so that way you can actually see what's going on. This is your intake ports. There's intake ports on both sides of the housing. So this is your housing, and on the rear plate you have your intake ports here. On your center plate you have the intake port right here. And then this is going to be your exhaust port on the rear plate. On your center plate, this is your exhaust port. Now this right here, this is the gear that lines up with these gears, so that way the rotor is in proper position while rotating. These are your spark plugs. This is your leading, this is your trailing spark plug. Rotary engines need 2 spark plugs because, as you'll see later, there is a large area that these spark plugs have to ignite to get full combustion. Oh, and one last thing, something unique about the rotary engine. If you can see this hole right here, this is where oil is injected into the housing itself, and this is to help lubricate the housing and the rotors and help create a seal. Those are your seals over there with the rotor. So yeah, let's show you how the rotor rotates within the housing to make its power. Alright, so let's start over here. So right here you'll have very little air, just air that might be this is assuming before you start your engine. You'll have air right here that is just come up through your exhaust tubing and is kind of chilling in the engine. But as you start it, the rotor will rotate this way and it will push the air out of the exhaust, and then over here a space will start to open, and that's going to create a vacuum. And as it continues to rotate, you'll see that it'll hit those intake ports, and that's when the air fuel mixture will start to fill up this area right here. And it'll continue to expand until it gets all this air fuel mixture in here. And then right here you can see it's closed off. It's no longer connected to the intake ports. And this is where you'll start your compression cycle. and it'll compress this air way down until it's at top dead center, which is about right there. And you can see all that air is compressed into this little tiny space right here. And at that point, your spark plug over here, your leading spark plug, will ignite, pushing the rotor this way. And right before the this corner passes by, this trailing spark plug will ignite to help ignite this large area that's going to open up over here. So as you can see, the flame's going to travel this way, and it's going to want to push this rotor, and it's going to expand and expand and expand until eventually it hits the exhaust port over there, and it'll keep rotating, and it will eventually just push. Oh, it's locked up a little bit. It'll push all the gases out that exhaust housing, and it repeats itself. And that is basically how combustion and power is made in the rotary engine. So now that you've seen the more technical aspects of that, let me put you up here. So it's important to note that as this is rotating, combustion, intake, and exhaust strokes are all happening simultaneously on each side of the piston. So as combustion is occurring here, compression is occurring over here to get ready for the next combustion stroke. And your exhaust is getting pushed out, what's left of it. And it just keeps happening. So here's the first combustion that we were seeing. This is where the second one's starting. It's being compressed. And then this one is being pushed out the exhaust while another one is starting with the air-fuel mixture. So for every rotation of this rotor, combustion will occur 3 times. Since we have 2 rotors and combustion occurs 3 times for each rotor, that's essentially what we would call a 6-cylinder engine. That's why this engine is commonly compared to 6-cylinder engines, but characteristic-wise, they're nothing alike. They can deliver very different power and torque ratios. They like to be compared to 6 cylinders, but they are not. However, though, rotaries are great cars, or great engines, I should say, because they can produce the same amount of power as a 6-cylinder engine in about half the size. If I were to pull a rotor out, if I were to pull a ruler out and measure this, this is about 1 foot long by 1 foot tall by 1 foot wide. That's about 250 horsepower in a cubic foot. That's crazy. So, another advantage of this engine would be that since all of this mass is rotational on this axis right here, and these 2 rotors are going to be opposite of each other, so if this rotor was positioned like that, the other corners of the rotor would be here, here, and here. So they're 180 degrees opposite of each other at any given point. And because of that, and the fact that this engine uses rotational mass as opposed to reciprocating mass, with pistons going up and down, that force that the piston has to fight of inertia going down, having to fight it to go back up, is called reciprocating mass. That's a big hindrance on conventional engines. That is why many of them are limited in their RPM range, revolutions per minute, and a rotary engine is not. It can hit upwards of, it can hit 20,000 RPMs if you have the right upgrades on your engine. This one is a completely stock engine. It will reach up to 9,500 RPMs. That's still very high. It also, since it's all rotational mass and it's almost perfectly balanced, there are no counterweights on this engine, which is also unheard of. The only counterweight that there is the eccentric shaft, which really isn't a counterweight, it's just needed to keep the rotors in place. But yeah, since all the mass is rotational, it's a very smooth running engine. There's very little vibration, and when you hit the gas, your car doesn't shake. It's just, you just go. Alright, so let's explain that. Oh, another great advantage of a rotary engine is there are only 3 moving parts, which that's very simple. Like, most of you could probably do this. In a conventional engine, you'll have anywhere from 20 to 50 moving parts. That's a lot of room for things to go wrong. This one, not so much. The only things that are moving are these 2 rotors and this eccentric shaft. That's it, which is very easy to work on. So yeah, those are all the reasons why rotaries are great. Now let's get into some of the reasons why rotaries are they're essentially a dying engine. They are not being made anymore. No one has really tried to put any money into them recently. Mazda keeps claiming that they are working on rotaries, but I don't know, I'll believe it when I see it. So some of the disadvantages are the thermal efficiency of this engine. If I were to put this back in here, so the way the rotary engine works, since combustion is always going to be occurring on this side, and intake and compression is always going to be happening on this side, you're going to have a lot higher heat density over here. Since the flame is continuously traveling this way, this side is going to be much hotter. And that makes it hard for the rotor to create a seal, which I will show you why this makes that difficult. So since the heat is primarily over here, this side of the metal will expand more, and this side not so much. So you have different expansion and contraction differences. I'm not sure how to word that. And it makes it very hard for the rotor to create a seal. Now, the reason why you need these seals, there's all kinds of them over here. The reason why you need these seals is so that air from, you say, I don't know, over here doesn't get into over here, like your exhaust doesn't get into your air intake. You wouldn't want air that you already burned to be in air that you're about to burn. That just wouldn't work. So you have these seals to make sure air doesn't pass over this way, over the face of the rotor, and on the sides of the rotors. So you have these seals. These are your side seals. You have this little tiny spring, it's kind of wavy, so it presses against the wall, that goes right in here. And then you have your side seal that goes right in there, and it'll press against the side of the plate of the front and center plates, so that way no air can travel over this way. Now these, and you're supposed to have a face seal right here, but upon disassembly of this engine, I discovered that there were none, which might be a contributing factor to why this engine would not start anymore. I'm not sure. I haven't finished the teardown yet of this. I don't have the tools to do it. I have to take it to a garage. So yeah, then to continue on with our seals, you have your face seals, your side seals, and then you have your infamous apex seals. 9 times out of 10, when a rotary engine won't start, this is the reason why, assuming you've checked everything else first. These go right in the corners, right here. It's not going to slide in for me. But yeah, those go right in there, along with these corner seals, these little button looking things to help hold the apex seals in there. And these, both of them have varying springs to help make contact against the sides of the surfaces. But the reason why the apex seals are typically the first things to break is because they're right at the corner of these triangles. And as this thing spins at ridiculously high RPMs, it will bang against the side of these housings. In doing that over and over and over and over again, no matter what kind of material it is, it's eventually going to wear out. And so yeah, that's why these Apex seals they suck. So yeah, but back to thermal efficiency. If you have heat constantly expanding over here and contracting over here, that's going to make it hard for these seals to properly press against the face of the plate without, letting air pass over. But, Mazda has done a fairly good job of designing these seals, and for the most part, these seals will prevent any air from crossing over. So, low thermal efficiency is one issue with this engine, which another issue would be the seals, which is caused by the thermal efficiency. Another factor, or another disadvantage of this engine, is that by design it burns oil. And if you burn oil, you're going to have lower emissions, which is probably the number one reason why this engine is not around anymore, because it just cannot pass today's emission standards. Online, it'll tell you that this car gets anywhere between 22 to 25 miles per gallon. That's not true at all. From experience, it gets about 15. They're not very thermally efficient at all. Emissions efficient at all. And there's a couple reasons for that. One of them being that it burns oil. The second being, since this large area has to be, since such a large area has to have combustion, it's not always going to burn all of the air-fuel mixture, and it's going to spit some of it out the exhaust. And that's a main reason why you see flames coming out of rotaries a lot, is because of this factor right here. It just has such a large area to burn. So yeah, I mean, that's your basic overview of how it works. I hope you guys understood that. I tried to put it in as simple of terms as possible and give you guys the best prop setup that I could. I tore apart one of my babies to get you guys this video. So yeah, thanks and have a nice day.